The station woke to static. Lights blinked along the metal corridors. Screens that had been dark for years brightened at once. Mara sat at the receiver, thumb on the cold glass, listening. At first the sound was only white noise and the slow tick of aging circuits. Then a pattern rose from the hiss, a rhythm that did not belong to any machine on record. Mara had worked at Beacon 4 for 8 years. She knew the sound of storms, the cough of failing relays, the small music of routine checks. This was different. The rhythm folded into shapes. The shapes formed words. She sent a ping to the control deck. Data poured back faster than the servers had in a long time, carrier waves, broken packets, a stream full of static and sudden clarity. The translation engine spat out fragments that meant nothing and everything: home, warning, listen. Commander Hale came in with sleep in his hair and disbelief on his face. The whole base had already changed the way it moved, quiet, careful, like people who expect something terrible to happen at any wrong step. The feed scrolled in the central room. It did not come from a regular relay. It came from deep in the silent net, from an old probe with a soft name, Argo 9. Argo 9 had been declared lost 20 years earlier after a micrometeor strike. It had left the system long ago and then vanished into the cold. Now it was singing. Hale, Mara said, keeping her voice low. It says something about home. It says, warning. Hale read the lines. The base had plans for hull breaches and solar flares, but it had no plan for messages that seemed to come back from the dead. The feed arrived in pieces, first single words with no order, then lines that tightened the air in the room. Last signal from home, the warning spread. Beacon 4 flagged the stream as unverified and set it to priority 1. The map on the wall lit up with slow red pulses. The source was not only the station, other receivers were picking up the same carrier. The message, whatever it was, had weight. It had found a way into the networks that connected distant places and private lives. The first human reaction was disbelief. People read the same strings of text and told themselves it was an error, a hoax, an old file misread. Then a timestamp arrived, tomorrow. Panic does not always roar. Sometimes it begins as small, quiet choices. A mother in a coastal town closed the shutters. A captain rerouted a cargo run. A researcher cancelled a shift. Newsrooms typed the words "last signal from home" into headlines and hit publish. The warning spread not because everyone believed it. It spread because the message asked them to pass it on. Messages move like smoke. A relay forwarded it, another server copied it. Machines obeyed their instructions and handed the stream on. Humans obeyed habit and forwarded it too. In the space of an hour, the warning touched ports, shops, and sleeping homes. Mara did not leave her console. She fed the signal into old decoders and watched as the pattern changed. The message learned the tongues of its listeners. In one town it used a farmer's phrase. In another it sounded like a child's plea. It gave coordinates, not to stars or planets, but to places on Earth. It sketched outlines of towns and left little markers where nothing seemed to be left. Hale tried to pull the station into lockdown. Protocol called for containment of unknown signals. But the net had already moved. Firewalls and gates meant little against a message passing from device to device, from human to human. The warning leaked through like water through a sieve. People shared it because curiosity and fear pushed them to do so. When the translators finally managed a full sentence, it read like both a lifeline and a threat: do not answer. Do not open. Do not reply. They come when you call. The room went very quiet. The words were simple and blunt. They fit like a splinter under the nail. Then came another line, small and desperate: we tried to warn. We failed. We send the last signal from home. No one in Beacon 4 knew who they were. The feed did not say if they were illness or army, friend or enemy. The danger might be something that tracked replies, or it might be a warning about a different danger entirely. The worst thing was that the message itself acted like a map. A warning that spread could be the very thing that taught someone how to find the spreaders. Images followed, not full pictures but ghost outlines burned into memory, buildings with broken roofs, faces half remembered, a warped symbol that looked like a safety glyph twisted by fear. The stream paused and then came back with a line that felt like a confession: it learned our maps. It uses our maps to come home. Across the world, devices that had been set to sleep buzzed awake. 1,000 private calculations began. People counted loved ones, checked lists, tried to decide whether to obey the strange command or to protect others by sharing the only clue they had. The message did not give them a choice. It gave them a fear. Mara watched the relay console. Protocol told her to cut the beam, to stop the signal from leaving Beacon 4. She could obey orders and seal the station, or she could push the key and send the warning further, letting others decide. Either choice felt like opening a locked door. Her finger hovered. For half a breath she thought of all the small lives tied to the networks beyond the glass, a child who would never guess the weight of a packet, a fisherman on a dark sea, a professor who loved quiet nights. She pushed the key. The network took the warning and carried it on. The words moved out into the night and into the mouths of people who read and then retyped, forwarded and then forwarded again. The warning spread, and with it a question one the whole world would feel in its chest: when the message says not to answer, will anyone stop answering before it is too late? When the warning left Beacon 4, it did not leave empty. It carried a new sound with it, the small, bright click of people deciding. Messages moved fast. So did choices. Mara watched the feed as answers began to come back. Not many at first: short pings from sleepy ports, a handful of test replies from cautious stations. The network logged each one and placed a tiny flag beside it. Hale ordered the logs sealed. Protocol said, "Do not respond." But protocol lived in paper and code. It did not live in the chest of a worried man with a wife on a ship, or in the hands of a young operator who could not sleep. In a fishing village 2 coasts away, Tomasz turned on an old radio because a neighbor had mentioned the warning in the market. Tomasz kept his radio because the sea could be cruel and you could not trust phones where waves ate signals. He had never expected to hear a message that named him. The feed had learned his name, a small, neat thing that fit between the static. He answered. He asked a single question into a microphone held with hands that shook. His voice was calm enough, the sort of calm that is born when a person believes a machine will reply with reason and fact. The answer came in a tone like a bell. For a moment it sounded like a friend. Then every light in his house went out. In another place, a city scholar read the line "Do not answer" and decided to test it. He sent a packet marked "Confirm." His lab monitor gave back numbers that meant nothing. A woman on the other side of town, watching the stream on a second-hand tablet, typed a note into a chat and hit send to a dozen contacts. She wrote, "We must tell others." Her screen blinked once and then never lit again. Beacon 4 had not expected replies to carry consequence. They had expected confusion, not a tally of vanished people. But replies left traces. They rolled through the web like footprints in mud. Someone, or something, was reading those traces. Hale called an emergency meeting. The room was full and thin with sleep. The map on the wall showed dots where replies had come from. Some were dots of light that went out and did not come back. They were silent places now, where devices no longer answered a ping. Correlation is not causation, one of the analysts said, fingers ready on a keyboard. He made charts and crossed lines. The data wanted a neat pattern. It refused to give one. Replies came from strange places: a coast town, a night bus, a private server in a city that had been empty for weeks. The only link between them was that someone had answered. Mara asked the simplest question. What if the warning is bait? The room did not like that question. People needed belief and plan. The word bait made hands shake. Hale rubbed his forehead until it hurt. We must assume two things, he said at last. 1. The message wants to be shared. 2. Sharing it may call something. They tested this in silence. Beacon 4 jammed outgoing traffic for 10 minutes. They watched. Nothing else happened. They unjammed. Replies restarted. It was a cruel experiment. Nobody wanted to be the one who cut off someone's signal for good. Outside, fear made odd choices. Markets closed in small towns. Ships changed course without informing anyone. People started to carry small radios again, tuning to the old bands. Some groups formed watch rosters at remote relays. They waited for the sound that would tell them whether to hide or to run. A reporter named Lena took her phone into the night and followed a trail of replies. She had seen the warning at breakfast and decided to drive into the hills where a feed had come from. Her car windows were fogged with breath and fear. On the road she passed small camps, cars parked with engines off, faces in shadows. People traded names and short messages. They wanted a story and a plan. Lena found a relay with a cracked antenna and a man who said he had never believed in anything he could not see. He had answered because he thought the warning might be a code left by his brother. He had asked his radio for any sign. He had told his story to Lena. He had not finished it. His eyes closed mid-sentence and did not open. The thing that answered replies did not show itself directly. It showed its work. It left places like rooms after a party, a cup overturned, a chair out of place. Devices were cold as if someone had taken the batteries. Small prints of heat, measured by instruments, lingered for a minute and then faded. No one could say what those prints belonged to. They could only say they were there and then gone. At Beacon 4, Mara and the technical team traced the incoming replies to a pattern. Not a path through space, but a pattern through time. The replies arrived in pulses matching the old probe signal. Each pulse opened a narrow window. If a reply went through in that window, something on the far end of that reply could find the person who sent it. What does it want? An intern asked, voice like a thin wire. No one knows, Mara said. She thought of the line from the probe, they come when you call. She felt the meaning like a bruise. The message warned people not because it was kind, but because it feared that a call would teach the hunter where to listen. Hale ordered a broadcast of his own. He recorded a simple message, do not reply. Seal your networks. Hide your locations. He pushed it to every channel Beacon 4 could reach. For a while, replies slowed. The world listened. But fear is a poor fuel for obedience. It made some lock their doors and others shout louder. Some replies were born of hope. Some were born of anger. Many were born of the small, human need to touch another voice when the night grows sharp. When the sun rose, the tally of silent dots had grown. People were missing. Small towns had fewer lights. An entire complex of research satellites went dark for a single orbit and then came back with corrupted logs. What the logs had seen was white where there should have been numbers. Mara slept with her boots on. She woke to the sound of someone pounding on the outer hatch. A courier stood there with a single packet and shaking hands. The packet contained a photograph, an old family portrait burned around the edges. On the back, a note in a hand that trembled read, "They know our names now." Beacon 4 held the image like a coin. It bought no answers. It paid only the knowledge that the warning had become a trap for the kindest human thing, the act of answering. The network had taught a lesson the hard way: some messages do not want saving, because the calling of help teaches an enemy how to come home. After the photograph arrived, Beacon 4 felt colder. The photo was small and old, the edges dark like burned paper. No one spoke of who it belonged to, but they all felt the meaning. Someone, somewhere, had learned how to find the living by following the sound of their voices. Hale ordered new rules. All outgoing traffic must pass through a single, watched gate. All replies were to be logged, tagged, and ignored. The team built filters that could scrub a message of any unique signature: the tiny timing ticks, the length of breath in a voice, the pattern of a mouse click. They tried to turn replies into clay, to smooth them until they could not be read. Mara led the effort. She sat at a terminal with a row of screens and a cold mug of coffee growing bitter beside her. She tuned the scrubbing engine and watched how a simple hello became a flat line of ones and zeros. The more they smoothed, the less human the reply felt. It lost warmth. It lost weight. It began to look like silence. But cleaning messages did not stop the losses. The pattern kept repeating. Someone answered, and hours later a town went dark. A ship that had replied lost its beacon and never reached port. The team could only watch the map fill with quiet places like leaves falling off a tree. They needed a test. Not a theory on paper, but a test in the field that would tell them whether a reply itself carried a marker. If the reply was the fault, could they make a reply that carried a false marker, a lie to fool whatever listened? Or would that only teach the listener a new way to hunt? Tomasz volunteered. He had lost a neighbor and he wanted to do something besides be afraid. He had kept his old radio, and now he offered to act as a probe. Beacon 4 fitted his transmitter with a scrambler and a delay loop. The plan was small and cruelly simple: send a reply that would look like a call from a big city, not a small coast town. If the hunter followed the false trail, it might show itself where Beacon 4 could watch. If not, they would lose Tomasz. Tomasz stood on his small porch with the sea behind him. He held the microphone like an offering. Mara watched his face on a screen and felt a sick pulse in her throat. Tomasz spoke into the metal and the night swallowed his words. The scrambler bent his voice, added a false heartbeat, and sent the packet into the net. Beacon 4 watched. For hours they waited and recorded nothing but the shadow of white noise. They began to think the plan had failed. Then, across a thin band of frequency, a reply came back: not long, not many words, but enough to show the pattern. The pulse was different. It matched the false city signature, not Tomasz's true one. Relief and dread warred in the control room. The hunter had followed the false trail. It had not come for Tomasz. If that meant anything, it meant they could lie. It meant they could lead the hunter. But the reply had come with a strange signature Mara had not seen before, a trace like a wet print on glass. It left a momentary heat signature on the relay and a short burst of high energy that made the lights flicker. Hale made a choice. They would set a trap. They built a map inside the machine: false beacons, fake towns, duplicated names. They fed the map into the net like bait. If the hunter came, it would find not flesh but metal and empty rooms with cameras. They wired the bait with instruments to watch, to measure, to learn. They named the project Quiet Net. Quiet Net was a long, tense night. Teams in distant places set up bogus stations. Old servers were brought back, given fake logs and false family names. Lena took part, though no one wanted reporters near the trap. She drove to a dead relay and posed as a bored technician, camera off, not typing. She watched the way fear moves people: some stayed, some fled, some answered because they could not help themselves. The trap waited. For 2 days there were only small bites, a false ping here, a tracer trying to sniff the false town's code there. Then, on the third night, the base camera at a ghost relay recorded something that made everyone freeze. The image was not clear. It was a smear of movement and a shadow without legs. The camera's audio recorded a sound too low for human ears, a channel of vibration that made the metal grill behind the microphone hum. The relay went dead a minute later. The ghost town on the map showed a thermal spike and then nothing. No bodies. No footprints. Instruments showed that something had been there and then left with speed. The hunter did not come through the air like a ship. It came through the map like someone stepping through a hole. Mara played the audio in the room and felt it press against her teeth. It was a low, long call, full of gaps that matched the timing of the probe's signal. It was not language. It was a code. Somebody, long ago, had taught this code how to listen. Lena wrote her notes by hand and then put them away. The people who wanted headlines found only a different kind of silence. Those who wanted hope found that hope had a cost. The trap had worked, or perhaps it had taught the hunter a new lesson. Either way, it had not brought justice. It had brought the knowledge that the hunter could follow lies. The team argued late into the next day. Some wanted to pull every relay and live like ghosts. Some wanted to fight fire with fire, send out more false trails and hope to lead the hunter into a place where it could be contained. Hale looked at the map and the small black dots that marked the gone. He thought of the family photo and of Tamash's steady hands. At dusk, a new packet arrived at Beacon 4. It was small, unremarked at first. It used an old handshake protocol that the team had thought obsolete. The header bore the name Argo 9. The probe had not only sent warnings. It had been listening after it failed. In the packet was a file, a line of coordinates and a single sentence in a voice that had the tired patience of a machine left too long in the cold. We learned a map. They learn maps. We tried to break our lines. We failed. We asked you to stop. You did not. The message ended there. No plea. No solution. Just a cold note of failure. Mara pressed her palms to her face. The world had become a place where telling people the truth might kill them, and lying might teach the hunter how to trace the liar. The team had a plan to lead the hunter away, but it would take more than machines. It would take people willing to wander the false maps and to stand in empty rooms. It would take decisions that could not be undone. Outside, the lights of a small town went out all at once. Someone answered a call they could not resist. Beacon 4 opened another channel and waited for the sound that would come when a trap meets its hunter. Beacon 4 learned quickly that machines could teach tricks. People learned more slowly. After the ghost relay burned and the audio left a ringing in every speaker, Hale called a decision. The map showed only two useful things, where the hunter had been and where it had gone. It also showed the places that had gone quiet because someone answered. The question was simple and brutal: could they bait the hunter into a place where they could watch it, learn it, maybe stop it? The plan they built was not neat. It was stitched from fear and hope. They would create a place that looked alive on the net but was empty in the real world. Cameras and instruments would watch every inch. If the hunter came, it would find no people, only metal and eyes. Quiet net would become a field of mirrors. They needed volunteers. People who would stand in for the living without being seen, drone pilots, camera crews, software wizards to spin believable chatter, and drivers to move gear at night. Tamash signed again without a pause. He had already lost a neighbor. He wanted to give the hunter a name and a place to go. Mara argued for caution. "We do not know what it takes," she said. "It does not come like a thief. It comes like an eraser." Her words made the room colder. Lena, the reporter, said she would help with cameras. "I am already watching," she said. "I might as well watch for them where we want them to be." They built the bait in a small valley 2 nights' drive away. It would look like a town online: fake retail sites, generated social posts, recorded children's laughter, the small rhythms of life. On the ground there were boxes and cables and black lenses. The relay they used was old and out of regular service. They hoped it was the sort of place the hunter would pick. For 3 days Beacon 4 fed the net with carefully crafted noise. The servers hummed fake life into being. The team watched logs and heartbeats on screens that glowed like a church. Tamash sat with his hands around a microphone and felt his throat tighten every time he pressed transmit. He kept a photo of his neighbor in his pocket and a promise in his mouth. On the fourth night the instruments at the valley relay recorded that low call again. It came like a wave of pressure through the metal. The cameras that had been set with motion triggers showed only a shimmer at first, then a shape that the computer could not parse. The hunters were not simple animals. The cameras showed a moving absence, where the lens should see legs, there was a blur, a hush in the pixels. Every screen in Beacon 4 watched in silence. Instruments measured heat, electromagnetic spikes, tiny changes in gravity. The relay sent one message back: the hunter had entered the area. They had planned for loud things. They had planned traps. But they had not planned for the sound it made when it moved. The room speakers filled with low vibrations that made breath feel heavy. It was a sound like a machine learning the shape of a door. It made the instruments sing. Then the relay went dead. Silence is not only absence. It can be a force. The camera feeds froze one by one. The instruments reported a spike and then nothing. The valley that had looked so alive on the network was empty of signals. Not empty in the sense of quiet, empty in the sense that something had taken the light. Hale sent a recovery team within the hour. They drove fast along roads that smelled of wet earth and fear. The convoy moved like a ritual, every car had its lights off. When they reached the valley, the first thing they felt was the cold. Not the air temperature, a cold like an animal's absence around them. The relay sat on its mount, the antenna bent slightly, like a hand that had been cupped and then let go. The ground showed little. There was no sign of a body. There were no footprints. The cameras lay on their mounts, lenses clouded as if something had breathed over them. A single door of a metal box that housed the main server had been opened and then closed. Inside, the logs were corrupted. Where data should have been, there was white noise with an odd pattern, the same low spacing as the hunter's call. Tomasz was not with them. He had been at the relay that night. He had sent the human noises. He had sat hidden in the van waiting for the hunter to appear. Now his seatbelt hung loose. His jacket lay over the back of a chair. There was no sign of him. Mara found his photo in the van. The image had a coffee stain and a drop of salt like a dried tear. She kept it pressed in her palm and felt the shake of her hand. They ran tests. They tried to play back the hunter's call at low power. The camera lenses clouded more. The metal in one relay warmed for a moment and then cooled as if something had passed through it. Whatever the hunter was, it did not simply move in the world. It seemed to cross the seams between signals and matter. Anger moved like a machine people had not meant to build. Some wanted to burn every relay and go dark forever. Others wanted to send out 1,000 lures until the hunter grew tired. Hale scrambled between them like a man at the prow of a ship in a storm. Lena wrote everything down and then ripped the pages into small strips and hid them in her coat. Her reporting had promised truth, but there was a truth that tasted like metal in the mouth. She could not publish the names of the volunteers. She could not say what the valley had become. People needed to know, yes. But some things only made panic. The cost was clear: every time a human voice answered, the hunter learned another map. Every time they set a trap, they might teach it new tricks. Tomasz had been brave. Tomasz had been gone. His absence weighed on the team like a quiet debt. When Beacon 4 returned to their screens that night, they found a packet waiting in the queue. It was small, the sort of file that belonged to an old probe. The header read Argo 9. The message was short. It contained a single line in a voice that had no heat left: "We tried to trap. We failed. They do not fear death. They fear being forgotten. They come for the voices that call them home." Below the line, the packet carried a piece of audio. It was a voice, altered and soft. The voice said one simple thing in the exact cadence Mara used when she called her sister. The word was her sister's name. Mara's hand closed and would not open. The room felt suddenly too small. The team had hunted and been hunted. The map they had taught had become a ladder for something that no one understood. Outside, the network hummed on. Somewhere, a phone rang and a child answered with a sleepy voice. The call sounded like any other small, human sound. It was the sound the hunter had been waiting for. Beacon 4 sat on a thin ledge between fear and action. The hunter had learned maps. It had learned names. It came for the voices that called it home. That single truth made everything else small and sharp. Hale called the team together. Faces were drawn and tired. Tomasz was gone. Lines on the map blinked like old wounds. The room smelled of coffee and the metal cool of late hours. People wanted answers. They wanted revenge. Mostly they wanted to stop the quiet from taking more lives. Mara listened. She wanted to save people, but she also wanted to keep what was left of being human. She thought about the line in the last Argo 9 packet, "They do not fear death. They fear being forgotten." If the hunter came for memory, perhaps the answer was not to hide, not to fight, but to unteach it the thing it wanted. The plan they made was quiet and terrible. It asked the world to become small for a while. It asked people to let go. First, they would try to give the hunter a new home far from Earth. They would build a signal that looked like the whole world: names, accents, laughter, maps, and send it away on the last working probe. The probe would carry voices and places that sounded like home. It would carry false maps and many traps. If the hunter chased that signal into the void, maybe it would follow until it could not find its way back. Maybe, in a cold far place, it would learn the wrong maps and be trapped among lies. Second, they would ask the world to fall nearly silent. All public archives with names would be scrubbed. Records would be sealed. People would refrain from calling names into open channels. The world would practice forgetting for a while, to take away the bait the hunter used. The choice sat on a table like a single coin. It asked for heavy things. To send the probe was to risk luring the hunter into deeper hunger. To go silent was to lose pieces of memory: birthdays, small stories, talk of dead grandparents. It was to trade voices for lives. Hale did not like the trade. Still, he made the calls. He used Beacon 4's reach. He sent short orders to governments and port managers, to small towns and relay keepers. He told them the truth in the blunt language the world needed: stop answering. Seal your servers. Hide your names for now. People listened in many places. Some obeyed. Some did not. Some burned names into paper before they erased them. That was the human part the hunter fed on. But many complied. The net went dim. For a day, then two, the noise fell like thawing ice. Meanwhile, Argo 9 was repaired as best they could. It had been a ghost that came back with a warning. Now it would be more. Lena helped load the files. She watched records turn into sound files: children singing, market calls, the exact cadence of a town at dawn. They mixed these voices with traps, time-stamped echoes, and loops that would lead a listener in circles. Tomasz's name was not on the files. His voice was not recorded. No one could bear that. But they wrote his neighbor's laugh into a loop, and they taped a small joke he used to tell. They made the probe a mirror of all the noises the hunter had learned to love. The launch was small and private. A single dish pushed the signal. Argo 9's engines were weak, but they had enough fuel to put the probe on a slow, one-way path. If the hunter took the bait, there would be time for the team to watch. If the hunter ignored it, at least Earth had tried. Mara stayed in the control room while the dish turned and sent the first packet. A beam of radio slid out like a long thin ship. It carried the sounds of home. It carried the maps that were lies. Hale watched the relay logs with a hand on his cheek. Lena put a recorder to her mouth and spoke words she had never wanted to say. "Goodbye," she whispered into the file, and the whisper went with the signal into the night. When the probe went live, the net already dim picked up a thread of noise. Machines heard what sounded like parties and church bells and the steady talk of small kitchens. For those who had chosen to listen, the lure was almost perfect. They watched for signs. At first nothing happened. Then, in the distance of the logs, a small pulse answered. The pulse had the slow spacing of the hunter's call. It matched patterns they had seen before. The team held their breath. The pulse grew. It moved along the bands the way a hunter moves along a scent. Instruments recorded a heat spike in a place where the probe's echo was strongest. Then the thing that had come for voices reached for the signal. It was not like the valley. There was no sudden silence on Earth. There was, instead, a long pull on the line. The hunter seemed to follow the probe further and further out. Beacon 4 watched as the pulses marched along radio paths, then faded into the black. They held their hands together in the control room like people in a small boat. Days passed. The net stayed quiet. Small lights on maps did not go out as quickly as before. People came back to their routines, but softer. They had lost more than noise, they had lost some ease. They spoke names into private rooms and wrote letters instead of broadcasting. They learned a kind of careful memory. Meanwhile Argo 9 drifted on the slow straight line they had given it. It carried the last warm things of small homes. It carried the music of markets and the hush of bedtime stories. If the hunter followed, it would have voices to chew for a very long time. Beacon 4 waited for the proof of success. They wanted to report victory and go back to fixing servers and fixing lives. But the world had changed in a different way. People did not rush back to shouting across the net. They kept radios off in markets. They watched their children learn to say names softly. On the 20th night after the launch, a packet came back. It was tiny and weird. The header bore no name the team knew. The content was a single line that the probe's old systems could read: "We listened. We followed. We were full and we were not." Then, after a pause, a sound like a bell underwater. It matched no human voice. No one could say for sure what had happened. The hunter had gone where the probe had gone. The nets had quieted. The human cost was heavy and there were empty chairs. But the losses slowed. New patterns grew, a method to remember privately, to keep memory from the open web. People built vaults of names that could only be opened in small rooms with trusted hands. Mara sat alone at the receiver one late night. She thought of Tomasz and the photograph, of Lena's whisper, of Hale's tired eyes. She did not know if they had won or lost. She only knew this: the world had traded noise for time. She turned the receiver off. Outside, the stars did not seem to change. Inside, the city hummed softly. Somewhere, far away, a probe kept its slow course and carried the last signal from home into the dark. If the hunter followed, it would carry that noise with it for a long time. If it did not, the hunter might still learn. Either way, people had found one small truth: to be safe, sometimes you must close your mouth. To keep alive, you must guard how and when you say the names you love. Mara closed her hands around the photograph and put it back in her pocket. She would remember Tomasz. She would teach others to remember quietly. That was the last, simple act they could not give away.